Hey everybody, this is Tom Mason. I'm back with another video. If you didn't know, I'm the miniatures director and lead sculptor for MegaCon Games. Been doing a lot of mercs recently, but I promised people when I finished my 100 days of drawing and doing that I would start doing my sculpting videos finally, and it's not been quite 2 weeks now, but pretty close. And I was trying to get one up Friday, wasn't able to do it, so decided I gotta bite the bullet. I gotta start it tonight. I don't know if I'll get, this might be a two-parter since it is kind of late, but we will go through how to make an armature. So what we have here, we have 3 armatures I'm showing you here right now to kind of show you how I used to make them and how you could still make them, and just some quick little explanation of how I do them. So this is the way I used to do armatures. It's similar to how I do them now. Essentially what you do, if you can see, is it's made of 2 wires. One wire is the head, spine, and legs, and the other wire is just your arms and shoulders. So what you do is you take one wire and you would fold it in half, spin it to create this spine piece, bend it out until you have the legs and knees, everything formed. Then you wrap a second wire around that one and bend that into the shape of the arms, and you just stick it on with a little bit of putty. That's very close to what I do now, but I do one that's a lot faster and to make this one. Alright, the second version here it's similar to this, but instead of having 2 wires, it's actually only 1 wire. Technically there's 2 wires, but I'll explain that in a second. So this is all 1 wire. Starts from here, goes up here, it spins, comes out as this arm, back in, and back to the other foot. So the way you do this is you just loosely bend them in half, find a center point, twist them together with some pliers, and bend the legs and everything. And then what you do here is then you just snip that, bend your arms into place, and it will essentially look just like this one, but with no head. And then to add a head, you just take an extra piece of wire to the right length and pop it in place, stick it on with some putty. And the reason you do this, and I don't do it anymore because I like my pieces to be all complete and sturdy like this. The reason you would do this is if you wanted to remove a head. You could do this also in some ways if you were going to have to cut up your sculpture to allow for an arm to come off. But there's some other tricks that I'll teach you down the road to deal with that, and you're able to keep your figure where all pieces are nice and sturdy, all part of the same armature, without having to worry about fiddly bits. Alright, the last one is this. This is what I do these days. It's actually, it doesn't look like it's exactly like this because you can't see the spin of the spine, but inside, underneath this little puttied area, actually is a few twists. So it's essentially made exactly like that one, but with less twisting, which just means it takes less time. It's a little easier to keep everything even, because when you have something twisting down here, all the way down here, you might notice it's a little hard to tell, but the legs or hips are actually offset from each other, which isn't a big deal, but sometimes it can throw you off when you're trying to get your proportions down. Okay, so I'm going to show you what tools you need. Alright, you don't need too much when you're making an armature. First thing you need is a spool of wire. I use 24 gauge steel, just regular galvanized. You get at a hardware store, nothing fancy. You can use copper, but typically you'll end up using a thicker wire, otherwise it'll be too bendy. You need a ruler. This is extremely important for all your measurements. I like to have one with millimeters. You can work with whatever dimensions you want. That's typically what we work with when it comes to miniatures. You need 2 pairs of pliers. You might be able to get away with 1, but there's a couple spots that are a little tough, or a little easier if you have 2. These are just flat nose bead jewelry pliers. Got a big one, little one. And last thing is you'll need a little bit of putty. I use green stuff, Kneadatite, whenever I do my under armatures, just because it's a little stickier than ProCreate. but either one works fine. Oh yeah, and don't forget some snips to cut the wires. Alright, so we're going to make a standard 35mm armature. This is generally how I work. It's the scale of the Mercs miniatures, and it's what I prefer to do. Everything I'm teaching you here works in any scale around there, you know, 25 to 40, whatever. If you start getting much bigger than 40, and sometimes even 40, you might want to up the size of your wire. So the first thing you do, like I said, you need two pieces of wire. So we take our ruler. I can do the slide gauge if I want to just set to remind myself the dimensions, but it's not a big deal. You put the end of your wire to how long you want it to be. I'm going to do 110mm. This is way more than you need, but you know, then you won't have to worry about not having enough. So this will be the long. You're gonna have two wires. One wire will be the long one, and one will be slightly shorter. This will be your head, spine, and hips and legs. The other wire, I generally make that about 60. The only reason I would make that any longer than this would be if I knew I was going to sculpt a weapon into the armature. Usually I sculpt weapons separately and then attach them to the figure. Alright, now next step here is to make the head and spine. You start by taking your wire, gently bending it in half. Oop, I gotta find my pliers here. What I like to do is I like to start bringing it together with my fingers as much as possible, just so they're close. You take your pliers. I tend to use the thicker ones for this because it doesn't slip as easily. And you just gently, this is gently, pinch them together. You want the wires to be side by side, to go down, not the whole length, but a decent way. Okay, so you'll have it roughly like this. Then I eyeball this. I'm gonna measure it now just so I can tell you guys what it is, but generally I'm eyeballing it. Let's see. This is where I'm gonna put a slight twist in the chest area just to help hold the wires together, but we're not gonna do it all the way down. We're just gonna do it a little bit of the way down so that it will just help it not spread apart too easily. So this is about 10mm down. So this is the one part you really need two pliers. For the rest of this, you only need one set. So all I do is you have two pliers here and you just start twisting it. Do it, I think 2 or 3 times. You don't want it to spin down too much. You want to make sure it's a nice tight weave. So you got like 2 or 3 loops in there. And then, like I said, it just keeps the head part from popping apart, the head and neck, and when you start putting on the arms. And yeah, it gives you a little guide about where your arms will go and a little bit of more of a surface for them to kind of lock on when you wrap the other wire around that. This guy is going to be 35mm tall. So now you would think, you know, a lot of this goes to how you know proportions, learning proportions of the figure. I'm just going to tell you the dimensions, and you can follow that or tweak them accordingly if you're going for something else. So I like to make my legs a little bit longer. So the overall height of this guy, you know, we said was going to be 35. But there's a couple weird dimensions I do to kind of account for the fact that the spine might be twisted, and to give us a little extra loop on the head just to grab the putty better when you're putting that together. So for this height, we're gonna make it, let's see if I remember doing this right. Let's see, we're gonna make it about 18. I've gotta remember my dimensions. So anyways, you measure up like that and you just make a bend. Then we can check it again just to make sure. This should be about 18. Yep. And you can measure again to do the other side, but I typically just eyeball it. It's close enough. Usually when I try and measure and bend perfectly, it ends up being off more than just doing it with my eye like that. So Now you got a little T shape, a little upside down T. All right, this is where most of the bends from here on out, even the ones I just did, I don't do with the large. I typically use the smaller pliers. For the hips, at this size, you typically want to make them about 2 millimeters out from the center. So the reason I like these small ones is that they make a bend of about 2 millimeters. I get them as close as possible. I even let the tips kind of roll up on the curve, the bend a little bit. And what you do is I hold it, and instead of trying to be out here and bend, which you could do, if you do that, what tends to happen is you tend to bend this part back down, and we don't want that. We want to keep this perpendicular to the spine. So I'm going to grab that, and then you just, you got to get a good grip, and then you just push it with your finger. And that makes a pretty tight turn. You can pinch it a little bit to make it a little more of a crisp bend. And now you got that. Just go back. If you see anything that's kind of bending out of place slightly, just go back and bend in place. And this, as you see, as you can probably tell, is not actually even. So I fixed that a little bit. All right, so go back to this one, this side, and push it down. Oh gosh. This is hard because I'm trying to make sure I'm looking at the view screen and what I'm sculpting, trying to make sure I've got it in view for you guys to see. Okay, I got a little tuning fork shape. So head, neck, spine, hips, legs. Okay, now this is where we kind of set the height. I like to make the leg measurements about 19 millimeters, 19 to 20. 20 sometimes can be a little too long, but I do sculpt a little bit stylistically. So I'm going to set them at about 19, which, as you can see, brings us up to nearly 37 millimeters, but that's okay. That will go away as we bend some of the other parts of the figure. So you set your height, figure out where it is, and then I'll tell you what I was going to say in a second. You grab your pliers. Here, grab the wire rather with your pliers. You bend it up. Again, using that same thing where we're not bending the pliers to bend the wire. We're not moving the pliers, twisting them. We are actually just pushing the wire around the pliers, and it makes a pretty crisp bend there. You can do the feet individually, or you can do them separately. I didn't do a perfect job, so I got to go back. Biggest thing with armature, this is the most important stage of sculpting. If you get something wrong here, proportionally or poorly built, you will fight it the whole rest of the time you're sculpting. Okay, so now to do the knees and whatnot, here you can measure it if you want. I typically place them about halfway down, but this is a measurement you can kind of roughly take. So the femur is longer than these bones down here in your calves, which I don't know what they're called. So if you're gonna make one longer, this would be longer, but I do them right in the middle because I do one last thing. Instead of having, see how they're bent like this, if I bent them back, you wouldn't see where the knees are. So there's one thing I do, and this has two functions. One, I kind of push with my hands and my thumb, and you can do this with pliers too, to kind of roll the these lower parts of the legs back. It does two things. It retains the bend in the knee, so you can still see it, and it also gives you this natural curve that people's legs tend to have down there, so kind of defining where the calf is. Okay. And that also, when you do that bend, as you notice, I went right in the middle. It actually shortens this slightly, which makes it more true proportions for this part to this part. Okay. All right. We're all done with that. We take the wire for the arms. And we do the same thing. We just slowly bend it in half. But then this time you want to take, instead of folding it perfectly down along themselves, we're going to take our small pliers and pinch it near the center, and we're going to actually create a loop. You start pinching it with your fingers, then pull the wires around. Again, we're not using the pliers to bend, we're using the pliers as a brace to bend around. And you don't want this to be too tight because you have to slip it over the spine. It doesn't matter if you have the loop in the front or back. It's kind of preference. I tend to put it in the front because then I like roll the shoulders back farther. I can reset them, but you could just as easily go this way and have them seated in the back, have that loop in the back. This is a little loose, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up, whoops, with the pliers before I slip it on. Okay, should be a little better. Okay, now this part can be a little tricky. You want to try and tighten it close to where it's going to be. So on this size of figure, you want it to be about 9 or 10 millimeters up from the hips here. So it's a little low there. I made my loop a little lower than I meant. So you just kind of eyeball it, and it's okay if it's not perfect because we can adjust where the arms set after we have puttied this in place. So it's nice to have it tight if you can pull it off, because it will have less room to rock once you put the putty in, and just keeping everything more stable. So, but it's not imperative. A trick you can do too, if you cannot get it to stick, is you can put a little bit of super glue, and I mean a little bit. You don't want a lot, because especially if you're going to have this thing molded, sometimes super glue can disrupt the mold making process. But typically, if you put a little dab and it's trapped inside your putty or clay or whatever you're using, it doesn't tend to upset things. So, all right, we got it there. And I'm going to mix up some putty and show you the last part. All right, well, I have mixed up some green stuff. It's just a small little ball, as you can see. You can mix up more, but you won't need much more than this. All right, so real quick before I stick this on, I'm going to check my measurement again one more time just to see how close it is. And it's actually very close. So as you can see though, the loop puts one shoulder higher than the other. It's not a big deal right now, but what we will have to do is we'll end up having to have this one kind of point up and raise up a little bit. But we'll deal with that after we stick the putty on and cure. So you take your little ball and you roll into just a little bit of a sausage shape here. You can do this whole part with your fingers, but it is a little easier if you have a sculpting tool. You can use any sort of sculpting tool, but if it's a metal one or something, you're going to have to make sure and use lubricant like you always do with putty, as I'll talk about later. Or you can get a color shaper or clay shaper. These are great because they don't stick to the putty at all. So I like to press down as much as I can with my fingers just to really press it into the crevices and whatnot. And then I just use this to kind of push it around, make sure it's all the putty is touching the rest of the putty, make sure everything's closed off. And there we go. I can check my measurement one more time, but you don't want to move this around too much until it sets up, because if you do, yeah, there we go. Looking good. Yeah, if you mess around with it too much, it creates a cavity inside there, which will allow the arms to be able to jostle around, etc. So, all right, once you've done that, you just have to set it aside and let it cure. That could take up to 3 hours in regular room temperature, or you can stick it in a putty oven or some other heated thing like that. And yep, I'll see you on part 2.